Over its nearly 3 decades on television, South Park has portrayed the police in many different ways. From the bumbling antics of Officer Barbrady to the overly serious antics of Sergeant Yates, the countless law enforcement agencies parodied in between, and even Cartman demanding that his Authoritah be respected, the show has never shied away from lambasting and satirizing the cops. And over the years, as the landscape of TV and the culture surrounding it has shifted, so have the ways South Park has portrayed its police presence. But as a show that itself has very little respect for Authoritah, I think South Park's various portrayals of law enforcement begs one important question. Does South Park respect the police?
I am a cop, and you will respect my authority!
Okay, people, move along. There's nothing to see here.
When South Park began in 1997, they launched with a relatively limited cast of characters to flesh out the show, largely filling various roles needed around the town. And their initial approach was very of the time. It was very sitcom-y.
When the show started, we had Officer Barbrady, the big, dumb, bumbling cop, which is like so late 90s.
It's easy to see how they landed on one dumb cop to police the entire town in those early days. They needed to fill out the town succinctly in that first season, and the fat, donut-eating, incompetent cop was basically the standard sitcom stereotype at the time. There are many examples. Wayne Knight's character from Third Rock from the Sun comes to mind, but I think the obvious analog here is The Simpsons' Chief Wiggum. So while early South Park absolutely showcases the police as incompetent, as we'll go over in detail via Barbrady, it could also easily be argued that this was a product of the comedy and sitcom landscape at the time, more so than it was a specific commentary on the police, though I personally think it's definitely a combination. Both character-based comedy and bigger social commentary on law enforcement. Even the police cars in South Park replace the "to serve and protect" police motto with "to patronize and annoy." One thing I kind of forgot is that in the pilot episode, Cartman gets an anal probe, Barbrady is basically the main character of the B story, trying to solve what's going on with the cows in South Park.
This is nothing out of the unusual. Cows turn themselves inside out all the time.
This is a pretty common gag through these early South Park episodes, Barbrady refusing to see something obvious that's right in front of him, though this first episode also maybe implies a bit more inside knowledge than he would showcase later, denying that there's a CIA presence investigating UFOs in South Park.
That is the silliest thing I've ever heard.
What was that?
That was a pigeon.
But largely, Barbrady's role in the pilot amounts to him bumbling around, desperately trying to wrangle and herd the cows who are afraid of being mutilated.
Hold it right there, cows.
Also very notably, Barbrady is responsible for the very first Kenny death in the series, running him over with his squad car. A pretty big deal, as Kenny's deaths are probably the most iconic running gag in the series, at least in the early era. But cops killing or seriously harming children is a significant through line in the show as well. You'll see. Barbrady never really manages to corral the cows either. They manage to outsmart him with a little help from the visitor's device here.
I love to sing about the moon and the June and the spring.
But the pilot does set up Barbrady pretty firmly. A bumbling, incompetent cop who is often in over his head. He isn't showcased in all season 1 episodes, but he is in most, and this characterization continues throughout. In Weight Gain 4000, when Garrison plans to assassinate Kathy Lee Gifford, Barbrady not only compliments his gun, but gives him advice on the place with the absolute best vantage point to see Kathy Lee.
I think the book depository would be a good bet.
And of course, after finding out Garrison's actual plan, despite explicitly telling him where to go, he has no answers on where to find him.
Damn, he could be anywhere.
He also ends up arresting Mr. Hat for this crime. In the following episode, Volcano, he shows the volunteers a 1952 educational video on how to duck and cover from lava. This also showcases Barbrady exercising his authority when Chef questions this obviously terrible advice.
That has got to be the most ridiculous load of pig crap I have ever seen.
That's enough out of you.
This also introduces Barbrady's early catchphrase.
Nothing to see here.
While this is a pretty stereotypical police phrase, it feels like the way Barbrady uses it is sort of twofold. It's often hard to tell if Barbrady's insistence that there's nothing to see is a further assertion of that authority over the people, lying directly to their faces despite visual evidence to the contrary, or if Barbrady really is just so stupid that he himself doesn't think there's anything to see there.
You boys have been watching the X-Files too much. There's no such thing as genetic code. Whoa!
There is definitely an implication in these early episodes that Barbrady is corrupt in addition to incompetent. For one, on multiple occasions, he's shown to be having some kind of affair with the mayor, who both seem to be involved in aforementioned corruption.
I can assure you that it has absolutely nothing to do with the Japanese mafia.
Though it's also clear that Barbrady's understanding of the law itself is dubious at best, which doesn't bode particularly well for South Park at this point when he was seemingly their only police officer.
Is it illegal for Jews to eat Christmas snow?
Yes?
Frankly, Barbrady's understanding of most things seems to be dubious. Even when he ends up protecting the kids, like when they were being accosted by Barbra Streisand, he does so unwittingly.
Boys, shouldn't you be in school?
It's Saturday.
No excuses! Move along, you little troublemakers!
Interestingly, it seems even the rest of the town understands how incompetent Barbrady is, including the one person who could actually replace him with a more competent law enforcement agent, the mayor. In part 2 of the Cartman's mom saga, he and a bunch of other townsfolk get stuck in a film studio during a blizzard, and he is absolutely no help at all.
Officer Barbrady, let's pretend for 1 second that we had a competent law enforcer in this town. What would he do?
Honestly, this episode really showcases just how remedial Barbrady's knowledge base is, seemingly failing to understand even the simplest of concepts. When they draw straws, he doesn't realize that he's supposed to cut one of the straws first before people pick, and Season 2 as a whole really leans into this angle for Barbrady, particularly with the first and one of the few episodes where he is the primary character, Chicken Lover. This one starts off as a parody of Cops, as though a camera crew is following Barbrady on the beat around town, the initial gag being about the particular types of crime that South Park is generally faced with.
I just caught some guy in here having sex with one of my chickens.
But the episode quickly shifts gears into a more character-focused territory, with the reveal that Barbrady can't actually read as he struggles with the note left by the perpetrator. This is also a pretty funny moment that shows Barbrady once again being willing to abuse his authority for his own personal gain, or more so to avoid personal embarrassment, I guess.
If you do not comply, I'll be forced to execute each and every one of you by gunshot to the head!
This all leads to Barbrady having an existential crisis, eventually admitting that he can't read and resigning from his office until he actually learns how to, putting him in the 3rd grade class with the rest of the kids.
I've just finished reading the heartwarming novel Go Dog Go. I found it a compelling and disturbing look at the canine psyche.
But despite the fact that this episode is making a genuine mockery of the single police officer in South Park, the episode also comedically subverts expectations after his resignation.
Exactly 2 seconds after the retirement of Officer Barbrady, looting and pillaging erupted in the quiet mountain town.
All this time, Barbrady actually did keep this town peaceful.
The reason this plays so well comedically is obviously because Barbrady is so incompetent. It's funnier to reveal that his presence actually did maintain order in the town despite being so awful at his job. As you might expect, through learning to read, Barbrady does manage to track down and apprehend the dude who will not stop assaulting these chickens, but it turns out to be the guy who runs the bookmobile and claims he only did any of this to help Barbrady learn to read, which is a very funny motivation for f***ing chickens, but also, I guess, calls into question how much Barbrady actually achieved in terms of this investigation if it was all set up from the beginning. Regardless, the town gives Barbrady a huge parade, and he's driven through it by Jesus himself. But generally across the rest of Season 2, the status quo is maintained for Officer Barbrady. He's used relatively often in smaller roles, and those roles often include gross incompetence. The boys try to warn him about the hypnotizing scheme at the planetarium, and he just walks directly into that trap, becoming hypnotized himself, doing an Elvis impression, though a little dose of reality snaps him out of it.
You're a fat, stupid, worthless policeman in a small town, okay?
Oh, thank you from a fate worse than death, counselor.
We also get some real insight into some of the bizarre town norms that Barbrady upholds in the episode Cow Days, as Kyle and some of the other townsfolk formally declare shenanigans on the carnival folk who are passing through.
Well, that settles it. Everybody grab a broom. It's shenanigans.
Though this episode also features maybe one of the worst things Barbrady has facilitated, falsely arresting a couple of tourists for stealing their cow memorial and then leaving them in jail until they die, despite the fact that they had never committed the crime. This one is also on the mayor and some of the other folks as well, but, you know, Barbrady locked him up. In Spooky Fish, when Stan's fish starts murdering innocent people, we get a real showcase of Barbrady's lackluster investigations, despite the incredibly obvious evidence scattered across the Marsh's yard.
Well, Now this all looks in order.
Barbrady ends up tied up in the Marsh's basement for this entire episode singing Jimmy Crack Corn. He is a strange, incompetent guy, Officer Barbrady, further evidenced by his coffee order, which seems to just be getting smacked in the face with a cat. But the end of season 2 marks a pretty momentous occasion for the police in South Park in the episode Prehistoric Iceman.
Stand back, people. There's nothing to see here.
What about the prehistoric Iceman?
Oh, yeah, there is that.
This episode marks the first time that we see additional police officers in South Park helping out Barbrady. They attempt to follow the crocodile hunter and the prehistoric Iceman himself, and though it isn't shown to be a particularly big deal, this definitely marked the beginning of the show starting to expand and evolve in terms of its police portrayal, realizing that there's only so much they can do with a single bumbling police officer. And I think this realization is showcased pretty thoroughly in season 3 and beyond, as Officer Barbrady is utilized less and less frequently. He's really only featured in season 3 itself a handful of times, more of that typical showcasing of his stupidity.
T is for turtle.
In Jack Officers, they pit Barbrady up against Jackoff in a phony trivia game show, and the idea was that Barbrady would intentionally lose to Jackoff, but he can't even really do that right.
Blue is blue.
Honestly, the Barbrady appearances in this era tended to oscillate between that same stupidity we were used to, and now the occasional signs of minor integrity, though those signs were often meant to criticize other people or groups, like when he actually properly questions the ATF's evidence during the meteor shower party, or when he stands up to Nambla's threats.
Political prisoners? No, these are child molesters.
But these come alongside other rougher moments, like taking no issue with the KKK's demonstrations in Chef Goes Nanners, or his gross negligence when investigating the death of Mr. and Mrs. Tennerman. Though Farmer Dankins shot them as self-defense on his property, Barbrady was so distracted in questioning Dankins that he didn't notice Cartman literally steal the corpses. One moment Barbrady will give seeming reassurance that he won't do something stupid, like shoot the man who stole Cartman's trapper keeper, and the next he runs that very guy over with his car. They also start to slowly introduce additional police presence, whether that's more local cop support like we saw previously, or often other agencies like the FBI. We saw this in episodes like Butters' very own episode or Fun with Veal. When Butters went missing, Barbrady actually hangs up on him to try and keep the line clear in case they get their call for a ransom. Just, again, gross negligence and incompetence. And when the boys steal Farmer Dankins' baby calves, you can really see that Matt and Trey wanted to extend police operations away from Barbrady with the FBI's inclusion.
Who's in charge here?
I am, but I don't want to be.
And season 7 is where this inclination to move away from Barbrady really comes to fruition, with episodes like Lil Crime Stoppers and the introduction of characters like Sergeant Yates. But before that transition is fully made, there is sort of one last hurrah for Barbrady, a full-on Silence of the Lambs parody in an episode called Toilet Paper. And I think fittingly, this is a very silly and character-focused parody. While, as with most Barbrady stories, it does showcase his ineptitude, more than anything, it just kinda highlights how funny Barbrady can be as a character. In this one, Barbrady is investigating a TPing of a house which is perpetrated by the boys, and I think the initial comedy just stems from how seriously he's treating the crime, as though toilet papering is tantamount to murder.
You really have nothing better to do you? No, I do not.
Through this Josh Myers kid, who is the Hannibal Lecter stand-in, we actually start to learn more about Barbrady's life than we ever have before. He questions Barbrady's motivations and what led him to become a police officer, though the info he reveals, while it could be used to further interrogate Barbrady's motivations in becoming a cop, it mostly comes across as unrelated trauma.
All right, my Uncle Charles used to hit me with a belt.
But while Silence of the Lambs is about Hannibal leading Clarice Starling through the case and allowing her to come to many of the conclusions herself, Josh largely gives Barbrady the evidence and directly tells him where to go, which Barbrady still manages to mess up. He ends up wrongfully arresting Butters for the crime. And for many years, this would sort of be the last major showcase of Officer Barbrady as a character. He of course would make brief appearances for years to come. He's shown making many arrests when necessary for the story, like Stan's grandpa in Grey Dawn and the pharmacist in Quest for Ratings. His stupidity is still on full display at times, like when he tells Jimmy where he can find some ladies of the evening in Erection Day, but these again are all pretty limited, and that's because the show started moving in a new direction in regards to its police portrayal, with new characters and a new tone entirely. But before we enter the Park County Police era of South Park, there are two other law enforcement focused episodes that I think really perfectly represent the difference in approaches they took early on in South Park and in this upcoming era, and they both focus on the kids playing cops.
And it doesn't go PQ, it goes bang, bang, bang.
When it comes to the earliest era of South Park, there are few bits that are more iconic than Cartman running amok as a cop, demanding everyone respect his Authoritah. Outside of, "Oh my god, you killed Kenny," I think this is one of the show's most enduring catchphrases, despite primarily existing in the early days of Season 2, over 25 years ago. But there's another classic episode where the kids play cops from Season 7 called Lil Crime Stoppers, and as I said before, these two episodes really highlight how South Park tackled police humor in the early days, and how their approach changed as the Barbrady shtick grew stale. Cartman's authoritative rampage came in that first big Barbrady episode, Chicken Lover, where very foolishly Barbrady gave Eric a nightstick and an assignment.
You keep a tab on crime in the city, and we'll try to solve the chicken lover case.
10-4, Sergeant.
This is a very funny subplot, with Eric running around town on his big wheel, pulling over citizens, and largely copying the things he sees the police do.
Step out of the car, please.
What? Uh-oh, is this a bust?
Sir, enter the car.
I do think there is some pretty interesting commentary sort of baked in here about the types of people who might be attracted to a police profession. Cartman basically sees this as an opportunity to have power over people and force them to bend to his will. He isn't interested in helping people, he's interested in having authority over others and being respected simply because he has that authority.
I'm a cop, and you will respect my authority.
And beyond demanding respect, he uses that authority as an opportunity to, well, mostly just beat the hell out of everyone with his nightstick.
Respect my authority!
Obviously, Cartman is the type of person who would abuse authority and be more interested in assaulting people with a nightstick than with upholding the law, but it's not like Barbrady was a particularly good role model in this regard either.
Oh, you've got it all wrong, my little friend. You do it like this. You gotta get them in the head, they go down quicker.
So looking at this early episode and the way Cop Cartman is used, it aligns with their portrayal of Barbrady as well. It's just one authoritative sort of caricature, satirizing some of the most prevalent stereotypes of the police, but primarily through singular comedic characters. One dumb bumbling cop who has no real idea how to do his job, like Barbrady, or a very authoritarian approach where he abuses his power, like Cartman. But these are primarily showcased as individuals, and from a very cartoony standpoint. It's not really diving into the police as an organization or looking into the police system as a whole, which is definitely the direction they head in Season 7 and beyond, largely starting with the other Kids as Cops episode, Lil Crime Stoppers. Rather than take the old sitcom route of the dumb, incompetent cops, Lil Crime Stoppers takes inspiration from the rise of crime drama shows like CSI and brings a much grittier vibe to their cop stories. And they pretty directly call that out, as it's what inspires the kids to play junior detectives in the first place. This is one of those episodes that I cite as having the ideal South Park story structure, where the kids are initially just trying to do something fun and juvenile for themselves until they get in way over their heads. Though they're also clearly being influenced by those crime drama shows, the boys play junior detectives and are tasked with finding an old woman's missing pie.
Jesus, we're too late. I think we can piece this case together now.
Though they solve the case quickly, they let their imaginations run away with them, and they accuse this poor old man of planning to murder his wife over a cherry pie. But the boys eventually are hired to find Sarah Peterson's missing doll, which takes their investigation all across town. This sequence does a good job highlighting the influence from various types of cop media. They interrogate Butters with an effective good cop, bad cop routine. They follow leads and investigate the crime scene, which is even taken over by a bunch of other kids who are playing FBI. And of course, it all leads to a shootout with Bill and Fosse. I love the second half of this episode a lot. It's one of my favorite kids get in over their heads storylines in the show. The boys are given junior detective badges by the actual Park County Police for solving the missing doll case, which, you know, would normally just be a cute ceremonial thing to award a kid, but not Lieutenant Dawson here, who immediately sends them out on assignment.
There's a meth lab down at 567 Mala Vista. The operators are probably armed to the hilt with illegal weapons.
This is kind of the perfect first story for South Park to really dip their toes into this kind of portrayal of the police department. This twist itself catches the boys and the audience off guard, and they're sort of a perfect in-episode transition between the more lighthearted kids playing cops and the comically intense cop drama side of things. And it's incredibly funny to see not only the boys stumble into these actual dangerous situations, but all of the criminals panic as though the boys are actual cops, which always escalates insanely.
Damn,
But this is also the first South Park episode to really showcase the inner workings of a police department, the various personalities, the hierarchy, the culture, etc. And they pretty immediately paint it as a corrupt institution. The moment the boys return from their first case and get chewed out by Lieutenant Dawson, 3 other detectives are fully on their asses.
Well, if it isn't the super cops.
These other cops immediately probe the boys to determine if they quote-unquote skim off the top or partake in any other corrupt practices, and then they get paranoid that they're going to turn them in to try and fix these clear systemic issues.
You think you're gonna waltz in here and clean up the system, is that it?
We just want to be junior detectives.
But what's more, the episode doesn't just portray these cops as transparently corrupt, it also portrays them as incredibly stupid. They remain convinced that the boys are out to get them despite obvious evidence to the contrary, and after it's later revealed that they're working directly with the gang leader who runs the Peppermint Hippo as well as all of the town's drug operations, these corrupt detectives end up taking out everyone involved, including each other and themselves.
And that means that the only person that I can't trust is myself.
So while South Park was changing its approach to how it portrayed cops, it's pretty immediately clear that it's not really a portrayal that has all that much more integrity. It actually allowed them a lot more latitude to explore the depths of the depravity stemming from these systemic issues. They immediately showcase how corrupt cops protect each other within the police department and how they chastise and root out those that don't play by their rules. Obviously, this is all done in the name of comedy, stemming from the fact that it's very funny to see all of these play out from the boys' perspective, and the show prioritizes comedy. But I think transitioning from one dumb incompetent cop to an entire department for sure gave Matt and Trey more freedom of creativity with their storytelling and their criticism and satire. And Lil Crime Stoppers is for sure that transitionary episode. It comes just a few episodes after Barbrady's last big story in Toilet Paper. It's the first episode to introduce the Park County Police Station, where previously we would only see the smaller South Park Police Department, where Barbrady worked, and Lieutenant Dawson was clearly a bit of a proto-Harrison Yates, who would become the primary cop character in the show moving forward. Though, funny enough, Yates would actually be introduced just a few episodes after this, marking the beginning of a new era.
Oh, that's all right. Sir, freeze!
So, as we've established, Matt and Trey really felt they could only do so much with the old bumbling cop model and decided at some point that they needed an upgrade. They talked about this a bit in the season 19 commentary.
Over the 19 years that we've been doing the show, we actually needed real police. So slowly a real police force has shown up in South Park, and there's an actually police department. There's Detective Yates.
If you're asking yourself, wait, who's Yates? I thought his name was Detective Harris. You are correct. For some reason, the show seems to forget his name sometimes. They call him Sergeant Harrison Yates, and other times call him Detective Harris. But his canonical name does seem to be Yates. And interestingly, he was actually introduced as an FBI agent in the episode Christian Rock Hard. Maybe even weirder, the episode shows that he works at the exact same building shown to be the Park County Police Department back in Lil Crime Stoppers, but now it reads United States Federal Bureau of Investigation. This isn't really important to the video, but if I have to know this useless info, so do you. In this one, Yates interrogates Stan, Kyle, and Kenny after they're arrested for downloading music on the internet.
Sir?
Shut up!
Technically, this is a portrayal of the FBI, which we will cover more of later, but Yates basically teaches the boys a lesson about the dangers of downloading music, showing them the kinds of damage it can inflict on those poor musical artists.
Brittany used to have a Gulfstream 4. Now she's had to sell it and get a Gulfstream 3 because people like you chose to download her music for free.
The episode obviously doesn't paint the FBI's use of time and resources as particularly admirable, really prioritizing the quote-unquote needs of the already ultra-wealthy, but Yates was very funny as the mouthpiece for this B-plot, and it seems like Matt and Trey liked him so much that they opted to transfer him to the Park County Police as their new full-time cop character, which is a little interesting since they had only used Lieutenant Dawson a single time, and at this point, they didn't seem all that different. But regardless, they started implementing Yates into more South Park stories just a couple of episodes later in the infamous episode Casa Bonita. This is actually one of the rare episodes where we see both Barbrady and Yates on the same case, again marking the transitional period the show is going through. But with the focus of this episode being the fact that Cartman disappears Butters, I think that they realized they needed the search for him to be more serious and feel like it would have actual consequences for Cartman. It's hard to imagine taking it seriously with Barbrady at the helm. They kind of dealt with that same thing back in Butters' very own episode, actually. So they bring Yates Yates into the old South Park Police Department building to lead the search for Butters, though I think this might be the only time they had the cops wear these nice green jackets. This is one of the few times where the portrayal of the police is actually pretty straightforward and I guess largely positive, showing them to actually be doing their jobs and trying to find this missing kid. There aren't really any instances of the police doing something stupid to foil their own investigation here, which is something we were pretty used to with Barbrady. The focus of the episode is more that they're slowly closing in on Eric's scheme, and Eric panics because he desperately wants to go to Casa Bonita, continually pivoting so that he can. And of course, they do manage to eventually figure out it was him.
You're going to juvenile hall for a week. Was it worth it?
Totally.
But these instances of straightforward police competence are few and far between in South Park. The next major Yates-focused episode is The Jeffersons, the also infamous Michael Jackson episode. This is not only an episode that hones in directly on police corruption, but gives us our first real look at Yates' home life and starts to flesh him out as a character. When the Park County Police find out a wealthy black man has moved to South Park, namely Michael Jefferson, they immediately jump to frame him for crimes he didn't commit.
We've got another rich black guy. I want him humiliated and dragged through the dirt, and I want it done by the books.
One thing that's clear in South Park's portrayal of the Park County Police Department, it's that they are transparently racist. This is a major aspect of tons of the episodes we'll go over. Yates has his team go in and plan evidence for a whole smorgasbord of heinous crimes all around the Jefferson household, only to realize he's white.
We could have made an innocent man go to jail who wasn't black!
But this whole story here seems to be heavily satirizing the O.J. Simpson case as well. Basically a case that seemed to be open and shut, but was muddied by the fact that police literally planted evidence.
Just like OJ. Do you know how hard those cops worked to frame him?
Which truly is crazy. I mean, OJ definitely did it allegedly, and primarily got off because of the aforementioned planted evidence, and that's basically what they show the police do here in this case as well. Even beyond the Park County Police, they contact the Santa Barbara PD, who claim they planted all of the molestation evidence against him in the first place, obviously alluding to the real case against Michael Jackson.
That's damn fine police work, Sergeant. Damn fine.
But the Park County Police in this episode are basically so invested in planting evidence to frame this guy that they're somehow actively ignoring and missing the completely shady behavior he is exhibiting. Literally, while they're planting the evidence against him in his home, Mr. Jefferson is climbing into kids' windows and trying to sleep in their beds. This episode also actually starts to dive a bit into Yates' home life and introduces his wife Maggie, who helps motivate him after he questions himself.
Framing rich black men for crimes they didn't commit is in your blood.
So this is the first real episode that showcases Yates as the guy in charge at Park County PD, and also the first that gives us a look into his personal life, and it makes his motivations pretty clear. And I think the next major Yates episode also reveals why he ended up being such a good Barbrady replacement. Because where you can do episodes like The Jeffersons that satirize the systemic corruption of the police in a comedic way, you can also do episodes like Cartman's Incredible Gift, where Yates is shown to be, much like Barbrady, pretty fucking stupid. In this one, while investigating the left-hand killer case, Yates very foolishly believes that Cartman, after suffering head trauma, is now psychic.
Where are my car keys?
Probably in your front pocket, dumbass.
Most of Cartman's psychic abilities end up boiling down to him thinking about and imagining food, which is very funny. But over the course of the episode, Yates keeps arresting the wrong people because of this psychic advice. And then when the murders continue, he believes them to be copycat killers and not the original killer. So back to the gross incompetence angle like we saw with Barbrady. He is fully fixated on the idea that they need psychics to help solve the cases instead of just regular old evidence, to the point where Kyle has to pretend to be a psychic just to deliver some of that important clear-cut evidence to Yates. This does come across a lot like one of the older Barbrady type stories, though it's obviously much more intense in subject matter, basically a parody of Red Dragon. But Yates just makes the dumbest decisions at every single turn, even when they get to the killer's house.
Those aren't left hands, see? On your left hand, the thumb faces to the left. Those are all right hands.
Honestly, the time it takes Yates to get to the answer is so funny. They show an entire montage of him trying to figure out that you can just turn your hand around. So even in this Yates era, they choose some episodes to utilize and satirize the entire system, and others just to make the primary detective out to be a comically inept idiot. Kind of the best of both worlds. Yates often takes a background role as well, just popping in and out when there's something that requires investigation, but doesn't fit into the story in a larger sense. He's at the hostage scenario in the death of Eric Cartman. He investigates the disappearance of the Orca and Free Willsiacs. He explains case details to the Hardley Boys and Mystery of the Urinal Deuce.
So that's about the long and short of it, Hardley Boys. There were two towers that stood right here, and they're gone.
Okay, besides that last one, there are times where they just keep utilizing Yates and the Park County Police as a police presence without applying any sort of incompetence, negligence, corruption, or comedic spin. But those times, again, do seem to be few and far between. Season 10's Miss Teacher Bangs a Boy is one that is particularly damning. Even just these quick interstitial interactions between cops here.
Are you sure you're not lying, Foley?
No, really! I shot both of them. They weren't even doing nothing.
But when Kyle reports Ike's teacher, Miss Stevenson, for her disgustingly inappropriate relationship with Ike, we get a pretty good look at the hypocrisy of the South Park police, initially showing deep concern when they believe the victim is a girl, before shifting gears entirely upon learning it's a boy.
Some young boys having sex with Miss Stevenson?
Yes.
Nice.
I mean, this is one of the most heinous crimes we've ever seen be brought to the police in South Park, and they not only don't take it seriously, they display actual jealousy towards Ike.
We need to track this student down and give him his Luckiest Boy in America medal right away.
They only arrest Miss Stevenson because they're pressured to by Kyle and Principal Victoria, and then when she blames alcoholism, they don't even pursue a case. It is wild. Yates and his department also happily take tips from the hero known as Mysterion, who nobody seems to be able to tell is an actual child, though we know this is Kenny and he's pretty trustworthy. And they also mostly seem to be pretty annoyed by a certain other superhero. But there's one episode in particular that not only lambasts the police's methods, but also dives into the psyche of Yates even further.
Freeze!
Butters' bottom bitch sees Yates go undercover and perform sting operations to try and curb the rise of prostitution in South Park. But rather than simply arrest the people who proposition him, he fully goes through with whatever debaucherous act they're looking for and then arrests them over and over again. He is fully participating in the act that he's prosecuting. I think there's a couple angles here with the commentary. This feels like it's about the hypocrisy of cops who do this same thing in other areas as well. Undercover operations, like when selling drugs, they just kind of see the police literally committing the crimes they arrest people for. But on a personal level, it's definitely interesting how eager Yates was to abandon his actual police work and spend as much time as possible on the street. There's a tiny through line here in his story showing that he's kind of a guy who seeks escape from the life he chose through various outlets, one of the others being Red Dead Redemption 2, which we'll talk more about later. His career is obviously filled with questionable judgment. In City Sushi, he fully blames an Asian turf war on Butters, which is obviously a very Butters thing to happen, but also clearly wasn't actually his fault. The episode 1% has some pretty interesting commentary as well. In this one, a few people start to protest outside Red Robin, and the police throw literally all of their resources into containing it, so much so that it's entirely clear that the real cause of the problems and disruption are the police themselves.
We have riot officers here, here, and here. The media has been contained to this area.
And where are the actual protesters?
Oh, these two people right here.
This episode was obviously produced during the Occupy Wall Street protests, but in general, this feels like a pretty blatant indictment of the way police handle protest crowds, often antagonizing and exacerbating things to the point where they cause more issues than they solve. Other times, they just outright admit that they can't help, like in the episode Insecurity, when everyone was fully spiraling about delivery men and Banes, thanks to their, as the episode is aptly titled, insecurities.
There's nothing more we can do to protect your homes. But there's someone here who says he can.
They just fully hand things off to the security companies here. A Nightmare on FaceTime also showcases their incompetence as they completely fail to apprehend the Red Box killers, instead straight up murdering their own man and completely forgetting the crimes they were actually trying to prevent and prosecute.
We got this son of a bitch.
Wait, wasn't that Peterson in there?
Shh.
Particularly in this era, basically anytime the police were involved in just about anything, they would botch it somehow. Like when Aaron Hagen's father killed his mother.
Hey, that kid should not be seeing this.
The South Park police often seem to be focused on the wrong thing like this. In the Magic Bush, after Cartman and Butters use a drone to spy on the neighbors, Yates and the other cops aren't so much focused on the gross invasion of privacy as they are what exactly was captured on video, namely Mrs. Tucker's bush. Rather than cracking down on the use of drones, they seem to just spend a ton of money to form their own massive drone army to combat the growing use of drones. Not a strategy that makes any particular sense, really. Yates and the police play a big role in one of my favorite underrated episodes as well, Cock Magic, where they try to crack down on illegal Cock Magic the Gathering matches. The way they fixate on these underground Cock Magic rings is so funny, but they also seem to be far more concerned with the chickens than they do with the many people they're meant to serve.
Can you imagine being kept in a small cage, barely able to turn around,
and then finally let out only to be blasted by Arctic ice spells and legendary creature cards?
This episode has two different types of cock magic, consistently being confused with one another, with Randy performing the other kind. When these poor parents rightfully call the police after Randy performs at their daughter's birthday party, they're still too fixated on the underground Magic the Gathering to even realize what they've been called in for.
Do you know what the penalty is for calling in a false cock magic report?
Ironically, Yates and the rest of the police end up so enamored with Randy's cock magic at the end of the episode that the entire Magic the Gathering ring manages to escape while they're distracted. The final episode of season 18 is sort of a good way to close out the analysis of this initial Sergeant Yates era, I think. In some ways, the episode Happy Holograms pretty explicitly follows up the first episode that really puts a spotlight on Yates, the Jeffersons, with another pretty major focus on the rampant racism in the South Park Police Department. An officer tells Yates that they arrested a black man at the old Jefferson estate.
Did you choke him? Yes. Did you shoot him? Yes! So what's the problem?
This sees the return of Michael Jackson in hologram form, and obviously the focus of the entire subplot of that initial Jeffersons episode was Yates spiraling about his role in framing black men, not because of how detestable it was, but because he almost framed a white dude on accident. And this entire sequence here in this episode really harkens back to that story, with the police just shamelessly justifying their abuse based on race.
How about we say he's mixed race? As long as Adams only choked the black half, I think it's okay.
This episode also shows that Yates and co. are sometimes so focused on race that they completely miss what's actually happening, like when the hologram of Tupac enters the police department Terminator style, and they think one of the cops is just telling a racist joke.
A black guy walked into the police station. Yeah, wait, Mitchell, listen to this one. Start over. What's the setup?
This happens a lot over the course of the episode, and at a certain point, they can't even do their jobs because they're laughing so hysterically. Honestly, this might be the biggest through line for the Park County Police Station across the entire series, and it continues long after this, but we'll get there later. Obviously, they are overtly portrayed as unabashedly racist, and that never really changes.
Hashtag cops can't go around choking black people.
We know we can't, but we're trying to. Jesus, tell them we're working on it.
Honestly, this might be the episode that most showcases how the attitude prevents them from being able to do anything to actually protect people. Obviously, this isn't really the end of Yates' era as the primary police officer in South Park, but the season following this is pretty unique. It actually explicitly grapples with the previous two eras we talked about in regards to the South Park police, and it does so with a less than triumphant return for a certain small-town cop.
I like to be needed.
Season 19 of South Park is one of their most interesting in the entire series run. Honestly, it's a season I'd like to do a full separate analysis on at some point, but the season itself is very reflective. The show is sort of metatextually reconciling with its place in TV history, and its unique situation where it's this show that has existed for so long that it sort of transcended multiple eras.
That led us into the bigger discussion of like how funny it was that we were kind of this relic left over from sort of another time that like gets away with shit that so many other shows can't.
This basically gave them the idea to reconcile with this fact within the narrative of the show, rather than continue to sort of exist outside of these standards, which specifically led to the creation of PC Principle.
You know, it'd be pretty funny a PC person coming in and seeing this old outdated show and being like, what the fuck, why is this still on the fucking air?
So this entire season is Matt and Trey's way of commenting on South Park's old school vibe from the former era and how modern era sensibilities might react to that. And one of the many ways they explore this is by directly comparing the two major eras of the South Park police. Obviously, though the Yates era saw the police tackled very differently, they never fully got rid of Barbrady. He would play small roles in episodes or pop in for gags here and there, but was not used for much police work overall. They even talk a bit about how they kind of just ignored the coexistence of the two iterations of the police for a while.
We didn't even know in our own heads how does Barbrady work for them? Does like what and so we're like, well, it's almost time to answer that. In our same way that we're kind of updating and getting ready for the future, we're kind of getting rid of Barbrady.
So they picked this sort of reflective season as the time to actually approach this question. And this episode actually showcases one of the only real times we see Yates and Barbrady directly interact as co-workers. The police are called into the school for an emergency and Barbrady is noticeably nervous but we see him take orders directly from Yates.
Barbrady, you go around back!
Of course, PC Principal's call-in was not an emergency at all, and Barbrady rushes into the room panicked and shoots a 6-year-old. So this setup, to me, is pretty genius. They take on the more serious tone of some of the police-focused stories that the more recent era is known for, with a full squad encroaching on the school, but then also place their former cop archetype in that scenario. The dumb, bumbling, incompetent idiot who wanders in and completely blows it. And by placing their former approach to a cop character in a more modern scenario, they really highlight how not only the times have changed, but how the cultural reaction to this kind of subject matter has changed.
In the PC world, kind of talking about how you can't do that shit anymore, cops.
And it's not funny.
Yeah.
And even in the show, it's just like the comedy line is moved of what people want to laugh about with cops, and it felt out of date.
So that is clearly the approach here, placing the incompetent Barbrady in a serious police scenario and showcasing the fallout from that kind of massive mess up.
You shot an unarmed 6-year-old Latino child. I'm sorry.
You are fired.
I do think their approach for the rest of the episode is pretty interesting from a character perspective, though, because for basically the first time in the entire series, they give Barbrady a sadder and more empathetic story.
I used to be the only policeman in this town, remember?
You're from another time, Barbrady, and the last thing that needs to go.
Obviously, we all know Barbrady is a terrible cop, but it mostly stems from stupidity and ignorance and general lack of capability, whereas the police regime that replaced him within the series showcases much bigger, more insidious systemic issues: corruption, racism, gross negligence, etc. And so with that in mind, they tell this sort of sad, somber story of Barbrady losing his job and struggling to make ends meet because it's the only thing he's ever known. This is for sure the most we've ever learned about Barbrady's home life. In the early days of the show, we did get confirmation that he has a wife on a couple of occasions.
Barbrady, your wife called. She wants you to get some pizza on the way home.
God damn it!
And the episode sort of teases the idea that she's still around as he comes home and explains that he lost his job, with a maybe more heartbreaking reveal that his wife has seemingly passed and all he has left is this poor old pup.
Might be a little tough to afford your medication, but I'll find a way. You know me. I like to help.
This is maybe the most significant and sympathetic glimpse into Barbrady's psyche and life that we've ever gotten. This sort of sad, incompetent man who just wants to help people even if he isn't actually very good at it. Barbrady's apartment also holds so many details about his life. There's even a framed newspaper lauding Barbrady for apprehending the chicken lover back in season 2, one of his proudest accomplishments. But his apartment is a mess. It's covered in beer cans and bottles, hinting at his depression and isolation. The only person he has left is his old pup, who he now is worried he won't be able to take care of. Again, I really love this approach to this story because they pretty specifically explore the idea that Barbrady is not a bad person, he's just kinda stupid. But at his core, he wants to help. But now he's lost his job, he has lost his wife, and nobody really wants his help anymore. I think that previous line we heard him say is meant to really intentionally juxtapose Barbrady, the dumb incompetent cop, with the larger police force that is riddled with systemic issues.
I like to help. I like to be needed.
Barbrady likes and wants to help people. Sure, he's not good at it, but this small fact is pretty important when compared with Yates and the Park County Police Force. In this episode, they explicitly show that helping people is not their interest. They're the kind of cops who have joined to have authority and to abuse that authority.
See, it used to be we could beat up minorities and nobody cared. It's the reason a lot of us joined the force.
But the episode also showcases the hypocrisy of the people here in South Park who have moved into this new progressive era, but in a fully superficial way. Once they brush off and reject the police, they start to panic about homeless folks who are in front of the Whole Foods and think that kids playing ninja are actually ISIS, and they have no meaningful plan to address these things. Because again, their progressiveness is a facade. It has no substance behind it, and so they just immediately try to crawl back to the police to help them. And when the police don't listen, they all go back to Barbrady, who after failing to find a job has been evicted and has become homeless himself. Man, they really break your heart with Barbrady here. Him and his little dog just sitting in their outdoor box with the portrait of his wife there. Ugh, so sad. And then there's also the hilarious irony here. They fired Barbrady for shooting a kid and then try to recruit him specifically to shoot more kids.
I don't want to shoot kids!
God, poor Barbrady. They took advantage of the fact that he was desperate and has a desire to help people. They put him in another scenario they knew he was not prepared to actually handle, and then he shot another kid after being told the ninjas were ISIS. And of course, the people who roped him into the scenario took responsibility, right?
Everybody told me they were terrorists!
We thought they were, but if it turns out they aren't, as a policeman, you have to figure that out.
This sentiment isn't fully wrong, and obviously the scenario is intentionally messy for comedic effect, not making anybody look good, but the message here is explicitly that Barbrady does not have what it takes to be a policeman in these times, and I think there are a few ways to read into that commentary-wise. On the more obvious side of things, the police are rightfully scrutinized because often their jobs are life and death for the people involved. Barbrady is not competent enough to hold up to that scrutiny. But on the police side of things, this episode explicitly shows that these police officers don't have a desire to help, protect, serve, etc., even though Barbrady does. It's kind of a commentary about modern police. Barbrady doesn't have what it takes. He doesn't fit in with them. This is all pretty interesting because obviously we've seen Barbrady do some very dumb, incompetent stuff over the years, and he isn't really fit to be a police officer, but when compared to the sort of corrupt system that he's been replaced with in the new show, which is better? Barbrady plays a little role for the remainder of season 19 in the sort of 3-part ad trilogy finale, and he actually gets to help people throughout. He saves Jimmy from the Geico employee, Terminator style.
Come with me if you want to live! Come on, come with me if you want to live, I'm serious!
He's fully just in a supporting role for the remainder of the season, but they pointedly give him an outlet to help and be needed. Yeah, he maybe accidentally shoots one more guy, but he plays a relatively important role in the finale as the town has to reconcile with the sentient ads. This episode aired almost 10 years ago at the time I'm writing the script, and since then, Barbrady hasn't really had any meaningful role in the show. Despite giving him this sympathetic angle, they really do follow through with their promise of retiring him from the series. He makes tiny cameos in a few episodes. He even dons his police uniform again in some of those tiny cameos, implying that he's gotten his job back since season 19, but he otherwise has not been used in any meaningful way. Though, we do get a brief cameo of a very old version of Barbrady at Shady Acres retirement home in the post-COVID special, and even though this takes place in the bad future that is eventually overwritten, it does show that he has a new little dog, which, you know, might be the closest we get to a happy ending for Barbrady. But this mostly marked the end of Barbrady as a police officer in South Park. Obviously, the show wouldn't be done satirizing and commenting on the police. The modern era of the show, reflective of our own world, addresses police issues pretty often in a variety of ways. But before we dive into this modern era, let's take a quick detour, because the show has also made a point to satirize many of the other law enforcement agencies across their long history as well. Obviously, the local police were the primary target of South Park's satirization, but over nearly 3 decades, of course they've parodied other federal law enforcement agencies as well. The one used most often, as you might expect, is the FBI.
You'll see that there's FBI guys in about 1/3 of all the South Park episodes, and they all kind of change. We kind of lost these guys and went to different looking ones, but there's always just random FBI guys all the time, which is sort of true in life. There's always a random FBI guy around.
Whenever any shit goes down.
The first use of the FBI was in season 1's Starvin' Marvin, when the boys try to order a Takeo digital sports watch off the TV and are instead sent a starving Ethiopian child. This first FBI appearance doesn't make them look particularly competent either. They arrive at Cartman's house to bring Marvin back, but instead they grab Cartman, thinking he was the Ethiopian child they needed to return.
Here's your sports watch, son. Sorry for the mix-up.
In Cow Days, they help surround and try to corral the cow cult that forms around the massive memorial statue, which leads directly to the cows all jumping off of a cliff. Not a super great look. In season 4, they attempt to mass arrest members of the disgusting group Nambla, only to realize they accidentally pursued the North American Marlon Brando lookalikes instead.
Oh crap, we've got the wrong Nambla.
They're involved in a big Benny Hill style runaround in this one as well. South Park didn't often portray the FBI's methods as particularly effective.
Johnson, sir, check the goat for diseases.
Yes, sir.
The episode that uses the FBI most thoroughly is actually all about how ineffective their methods are. This is probably one of the funniest portrayals of federal law enforcement in the entire series. In Fun with Veal, after the boys kidnap and harbor Farmer Dankin's calves, the FBI comes in to stop them, essentially treating them as terrorists holding hostages. Unfortunately, their trained negotiator is no match for Cartman, and is shown to be just giving them baffling leeway in those negotiations.
We're giving the boys some guns in return for a calf.
He doesn't even manage to get this one calf because he gets overzealous overzealous and asks for a second, he is comically terrible at his job, which obviously this is South Park, so that's the point. But once again, it portrays a real lack of competence.
All we need to do in return is get a cattle transporting semi-truck that will take the boys and the cattle to Denver International Airport, where we have a fully gassed airplane waiting to take them all to Mexico.
There's also the angle that the resources going into this operation are just wildly disproportionate to the crime and danger being posed. I mean, some kids stole some baby cows. This is also basically the entire message behind the Christian rock hard subplot, when the FBI apprehends the boys for simply downloading music. And we already went over Yates lecturing them about the quote-unquote poor rich musicians who were being affected. There are many other occasions where the FBI are just there to facilitate a gag or move the plot forward without any additional comedic layers on top. Like when they show up to question Martha Stewart before she shoves a chicken in her ass, or when they take over an investigation from Dawson in Lil Crime Stoppers, paralleling the kids who were playing FBI earlier in the episode, or when they arrest Randy in Not Suitable for Children because he has photos of minors, the other kind of minors, ERS. It seems like they tend to use the FBI to portray their strange priorities or occasionally the disorderly bureaucracy of the federal government, though the time they did this most effectively was through the CIA, so let's talk about them next. The CIA's couple major appearances definitely make them the most used federal agency after the FBI, first appearing in the Starvin' Marvin sequel, Starvin' Marvin in Space. Two CIA agents are pursuing Marvin, who's flying around Earth in an alien spacecraft, and they interrogate the boys while on the case. This episode is deeply silly, as you can see, like when these agents torture the boys by rubbing a balloon to make that awful noise, but it also doesn't portray them as particularly competent either. They're distracted by the boys dressed as Tom Brokaw, and everyone immediately escapes on the ship that they had just seized. They end up joining forces with Sally Struthers in Jabba the Hutt form, freezing Kenny and Carbonite, flying all over the universe in pursuit of Marvin and the boys, not really managing to do anything on their own. The biggest CIA episode is for sure the 24 parody, The Snook, where they have to figure out who is responsible for placing the nuclear device in Hillary Clinton. They basically just listen to Cartman the entire time, arresting a Middle Eastern South Park family that Cartman assumes are terrorists. This isn't the first or last time law enforcement agency just kind of goes along with Cartman's presumptions either. This episode also satirizes the general disorder of bureaucracy better than any, with many agencies including the FBI, CIA, ATF, and President's private officers all vying for jurisdiction here. Speaking of the ATF, back in season 3, we got what was probably one of South Park's most explicitly scathing critiques of one of these agencies through the episode Two Guys Naked in a Hot Tub, satirizing their mishandling of Waco and portraying them as trigger-happy idiots ready to massacre an innocent party.
We did this all before in Waco.
Yes, but you totally screwed up Waco. You killed a bunch of innocent people and then tried to say they killed themselves.
Matt and Trey were very clear in their commentary about how they felt about the ATF's handling of the Waco incident.
There was like some HBO documentary right around this time that came out about Waco, and we saw it and we're like, wow, boy, they really f***ed that up.
The episode Major Boobage briefly showcases the DEA in another example of what seems to be criticism of their priorities. When many people start to get hooked on cheesing, which stems from cat piss, they just straight up start confiscating cats from children.
Oh, where? Get over it, druggie.
Season 23's Mexican Joker brings ICE into the mix as they round up suspected illegal immigrants and put them in detention camps. They don't portray them as particularly diligent in their methodology either.
So anyone can make an anonymous tip and you can round up families and send them away?
After Cartman's tip-off, they arrest Kyle's family, and when they realize that Kyle is Jewish, not Hispanic, they pretty immediately panic. I mean, they rounded up a Jewish family and put them in a camp. It seems pretty clear the parallel that the episode is making here.
I'm just here because some fat, intolerant asshole didn't want me around.
Yeah, that's why I'm here too.
So, the show has obviously always incorporated these other agencies into their stories in numerous ways, often shifting depending on the story and era in which they're telling that story. And though the Park County Police Department would still maintain much of its prior characterization post-Barbrady, they definitely started to focus on some of the bigger modern criticisms of the police more directly as well.
Boys, we are back in business.
Since Barbrady's retirement, the Park County Police Department's portrayal has largely been business as usual. Honestly, one of Yates' biggest roles in the past 8 years was in South Park: The Fractured But Whole. And because this game is such a massive and substantial story that doesn't really have any runtime limitations, we get a pretty substantial look at Yates' practices and motivations as a policeman. You can initially find him in the Park County Police Station, loudly reciting racist jokes with other cops, standard Yates stuff. The first quests he sends you on draw inspiration from the Lil Crime Stoppers episode. He basically sends you out on junior detective missions that aren't very junior.
If you take out the drug kingpin, we'll give you this junior detective badge. Pretty neat, huh? Now get out there!
But these missions all amount to rounding up completely innocent black folks in town. You have to take out Nicole's dad and then Tolkien's dad, and he makes it pretty clear that this is kind of just what the Park County Police Department does.
Brilliant work, hero. You're really getting into the program. You understand exactly what we're doing, and you're doing it right along with us.
The game also isn't shy about showing the police officers using drugs and partying with no repercussions either, but the focus is definitely on the overtly racist tactics they use.
I know that to a young kid it can seem like cops are racist and bigoted, but you can't believe what the media tells you. Cops are just people, like you, your friends, your family. People who work hard to— Spook!
It's revealed that not only have the police arrested literally every black adult in South Park, but that Yates has been perpetually cheesing and had even more sinister motivations behind a lot of his actions in this game. As per usual with the Park County Police, they were thinking of themselves and what they can and can't get away with, and not about the citizens of the town's well-being.
That mayor has been sitting in her office telling us we have to change our ways. The only way to have her removed was to raise crime in the streets. And now cops are finally able to do things the old way again. Don't you see this is better for everyone?
I mean, the man literally sicks Subway Jared on the boys. This game contains some of the Park County Police's most heinous actions in the entire series, which culminates in the reveal that they are sacrificing all of South Park's black citizens to a Lovecraftian god.
But I suppose H.P. Lovecraft was a racist too. Oh, fuck. Was he really? Like how racist? Really?
So, yeah, all within the story of this game, Yates and the police plotted to increase crime in the streets to allow them to abuse their authority again, released Subway Jared on a bunch of children, arrested every single black citizen in South Park without due cause, and started sacrificing them to an elder Lovecraftian god. And look, obviously this is all an insane escalation for the sake of comedy, but the escalation is the feeding people to the elder god part. It only works because of the baseline commentary that the police are prone to racist actions and policies. Season 22 basically has a season-long through line about school shootings, where they basically just continually happen in the background of every story, accepted as the new norm. And they don't exactly show the police as particularly helpful in preventing them. They actually even just presume that any death is a school shooting, even when not in school.
There was a school shooting out in the woods? Outside of school is the one place kids are supposed to be safe.
In this episode, Time to Get Cereal, Yates is continually looking for a kid to pin the ongoing Man-Bear-Pig maulings on, refusing to even entertain the idea that it's not a school shooting. This episode also showcases where Yates' priorities lie, as his biggest frustration across the episode isn't the non-stop death, but the fact that it's preventing him from playing Red Dead Redemption 2. And at the end of this episode, they fully arrest and charge the boys with the school shooting, despite countless eyewitnesses pinning it on Man-Bear-Pig. Though outside of Fractured But Whole, the pandemic special definitely puts the most focus on police. In this one, they've been defunded and are called in to replace the teachers at South Park Elementary when they're in a pinch.
This might be our last chance at a job, so I don't want any unnecessary deaths.
It's pretty funny to see the police try to use their typical police tactics in the classroom. When Kyle and Cartman start fighting, all they can manage to do is pull their guns, and of course, they shoot Tolkien.
Got him!
They even lie about this and claim Tolkien got COVID to save their own asses, which leads to a full-on quarantine at the school. The mayor eventually decides to refund the police to help curb riots caused by COVID panic, and that goes about as well as you'd expect. Basically, a lot of dead kids, including Kenny. Since they had this last major focus on the police, the show has used them a couple of times. They have to enforce the pajama law and pajama day. They arrest Butters for sexual harassment because he pinched a classmate that wasn't wearing green on St. Patty's Day. They arrest Randy when he goes full Karen in Streaming Wars, but it's all pretty small stuff, and that is basically where we are today. So, we need to answer the question. After nearly 30 years of episodes, multiple eras, and styles of police satire, does South Park respect the police? I mean, come on, I think that answer is pretty clear based on the overwhelmingly negative portrayal of nearly all police in the show. Obviously, South Park is satire. There are a couple of episodes and moments where, despite their lack of competence and generally awful behavior, the show has portrayed police as effective, mostly for comedic effect. But Barbrady retiring and the town instantly falling into riots and chaos comes to mind as one of these instances. I'm definitely not going to pretend like Matt and Trey are in the abolish the police camp. They even poke fun at this sentiment in season 19 through South Park's phony progressive attitude.
Wow, we've only had a Whole Foods for a month and already we don't need cops.
So cool.
My favorite line of the season is Randy goes, wow, we've only had a Whole Foods a few weeks and we already don't need cops.
And we don't need cops.
Like,
yeah, it's pretty awesome.
That's it.
Yeah, I love that.
That's the whole season in a nutshell. Like that kind of added, like Randy sort of encapsulating that kind of dumb reduction of that whole thing.
They've also talked in commentaries about how they have a friend in the police department that they go to for insight when writing police-centric stories on South Park. So obviously they aren't ACAB people. But honestly, that doesn't really come across in the show, because even though South Park focuses on some specific police who are very dumb and or corrupt and or racist, they don't really ever show other police officers who are actually good at their jobs to juxtapose them with. In fact, when they do showcase police outside of South Park, they often are also dumb and or corrupt and or racist. Like 97% of the time the police are involved in any South Park story, they are either actively messing things up, showcasing complete incompetence, undergoing wildly corrupt actions, displaying perverse racism, or just being incredibly stupid. So, no, the text of the show largely does not respect the police, does not respect Authoritah even. It's pretty clear, which I guess begs the question, if it was so clear, why did I make this video? To which I say...
Freeze! Ha! You're busted, buddy! I'm a cop!
Johnny
I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.